Hello and welcome back everybody. It's Complicated Relationships Reddit Stories. Hope you guys are safe and healthy. Now let's see what the story is about today. Well, what if you are suspicious of your girlfriend's behavior? You decide to snoop on her phone. You find out she's been lying to you and kept deleting thousands of text messages with another man and even planning a weekend getaway with him. It's time we listen to this epic story. Also, please support us by giving us a like and subscribing to the channel.
I first met Sarah at a yoga class in the summer of 2016. Never in my life did I think I would see myself going to something like that. It's not something I ever imagined myself doing, but when I hurt my back after falling from a first-floor roof at work, I decided to give it a shot on the recommendation of my masseuse. I looked across the yoga room, and there was Sarah. She had not long found out she had scoliosis after years of being misdiagnosed and told that it was all in her head, among other things. She was there with her mother, who was with her for emotional support and to see how she got on. After seeing her, I instinctively gravitated towards her. After the yoga instructor had a chat with her, she shouted me over and said that it was Sarah's first time too, so maybe we should sit next to each other and give each other a bit of support. I said that was cool with me, and she also smiled and nodded, so I walked over. We hit it off right away. My emotions went from a bit of embarrassment to serious amusement as we both attempted to fit in with the rest of the class. After the class was over, we were still talking away, and I felt a genuine connection and butterflies in my stomach. And as we said goodbye, we caught each other's gaze, and she smiled at me with a purity that, for the first time in my life, made me feel weak at the knees. I wouldn't have went back in a million years had I not met her, but I decided to go the next week, and when I walked in the door, I got those butterflies in my stomach again and was hoping to see her face, but she wasn't there. I felt some aching sadness when I didn't see Sarah. I knew nothing about her, had no way of contacting her, and felt this surreal sadness that was hard to quantify.
About 4 months later, OP was working on a roof repairing a truss damaged in a storm. And when he stopped for a break, the house owner came out and asked if they wanted a cup of coffee. They accepted, and she came out with coffee and biscuits.
As soon as I seen this woman, I just knew I've seen her before. It wasn't until that night, after racking my brains, that I realized it was at that yoga hall I had seen her before, and it was Sarah's mother. The next day, I was back finishing the job, and the same thing happened, and the woman came out asking if we wanted some coffee. After we finished up, I took the cups and biscuit wrappers back, and as I was passing them over to her, I asked how her daughter was, and was she still having back problems. She looked surprised, but smiled at me and said yes, then asked how I knew her. I replied that I'd spoke to her at a yoga class months back. She laughed and said she remembered me now. I then gave her a card with my number written on it and asked if she could maybe get her daughter to text me, as I wanted to get back in touch with her. I got a text message that night from Sarah asking how I was, and that she had looked for me again at the yoga hall, but I wasn't there. Turns out she had went back the week after me, as she thought it was bi-weekly. We met up soon after, really hit it off again, and after 8 months, she moved in with me, and I truly thought I'd found my soulmate. She was on disability and got personal independence payments and was getting steroid injections for her scoliosis, which, along with painkillers and exercises, were keeping her pain at bay. I was also making good money, so we were comfortable financially. When I got back from work, we were always in each other's company. It was at this point I was seriously contemplating proposing to her. Things changed around Halloween 2019. Our bedroom was always very active, but there were times when she occasionally wasn't up to it, and I was fine with that. Well, around October, she started complaining a lot about her back hurting more, especially just before the times we'd usually go to bed together. She started complaining while we were in the middle of it, so at that point, I'd stop, of course. I started feeling really frustrated, but I was positive that it was just a blip, and that we'd get through it together. Thing is, she seemed fine in other aspects of her life. She seemed happy. The first real red flag for me came in December when she completely stopped showing me affection. She just became cold towards me.
At this point, they were in the new year, and OP suspected her of cheating.
She had become downright cold towards me. I ended up constantly being belittled and walking on eggshells, couldn't do right for wrong, and was starting to become a humorless shell of my witty former self. One night, I got a hold of her phone and looked through it. It was as clean as a whistle. Wasn't even any messages from her friends or her mother, which I found weird. It was then that my friend told me that if we were on the same plan, then I could check on the carrier's website and see all the activity from her phone. We were on the same plan. That night, I logged into my BT account, started to sift through, and there it was. Thousands of texts and calls to this one number. It had started 6 months ago, and she'd be speaking and texting this person for hours while I was at work, deleting everything before I got home. I googled the number, and up came a local garage, one where she had got her car fixed previously. I remembered it taking a while for it to get fixed and her complaining about it. The whole thing was a long, drawn-out relationship. At this point, I was ice cold. I already suspected this, so getting it confirmed was more of a relief than anything else. I wanted to catch her in the act, rather than have her attempt to gaslight me. So, I found out everything about this guy. I found out where he lived, that he had a young wife and a child, found out what car he drove, even walked in asking about prices, so I could look this guy in the eye and get a measure of him. His name was Carl, with a K. I knew the relationship was physical for lots of reasons, but the fact that their phone calls and texts stopped from 1 to 2 each day meant that was the time they were meeting up. One day, I decided to drive by his garage about 1:30, and her car was just sitting there, and the place was locked up, so mystery solved. I was at this point at the end of my tether, and ready to just tell her that I knew everything and get out of the house, when she asked if it would be okay to go away to a spa place for the weekend alone. She said she was depressed with everything, with her back being so much worse, that this place would be great to help with that, with all the things she could do. That she could come back refreshed and like a new person. She was right about that, because I didn't know who was standing in front of me anymore. Obviously, she wasn't going there alone. This would be a weekend away with this guy. I said fine. Now, I had a new plan, and this would be the last thing I'd do for her. I wanted to get back at her in style. I didn't just want to have her cry and gaslight me for days, then leave on her terms, making me the bad guy.
Now, Friday came around and the spa was 100 or so miles down the road, so she decided to get a train.
I took her to the train station, despite her protests that she would get a taxi, as I wanted to see her off. We drive in, and as I'm looking for a place to park, you wouldn't guess whose car I spot. That's right, Carl with a K. I think I'm going to have some fun and make her squirm, so I park up directly next to him. They're right next to each other, and she immediately becomes uneasy. I'm pretending to look for something, trying to draw out the moment. She started to silently giggle. Well, she's desperately trying not to laugh. I'm pretending not to notice. She's tapping her hand on her trouser leg, and from the corner of my eye, I can see him, with his head on the steering wheel. She actually lets out a laugh, then quickly disguises it as a cough and starts clearing her throat. I helped her into the train station with her things, said goodbye, and walked away. By the time I got out, Carl's car was nowhere to be seen, so I went back home and carried out my plan. I started with a locksmith to come out to change the locks. I then pack all of her clothes into bin bags and put it round the side of the house. On Friday night, with the noise of her laughing at me ringing in my ears, I took our cat's litter tray, opened the bin bag with Sarah's belongings in it, and threw it in. Gave the bag a good shake, then tied it up again. Ha ha! I spent the Saturday in a mire of depression, answering her texts with the only energy I could muster, which wasn't a lot. I complained of a severe headache from a hangover I never had, and the text dwindled. Sunday came, and I was ready to execute the final part of my plan. Firstly, I drove to Carl's house and put a letter through his door to his wife. Inside it was a letter outlining how her husband was having a relationship with my girlfriend, copies of her phone calls and text log, and that they were away together this weekend. Got in my car and drove for a minute, then parked and phoned Sarah. I genuinely can't remember a lot of what I said to her, but it was something along the lines of me asking how everything was going. She started to gush about how much she enjoyed herself, that she feels like a new woman, and that she could maybe see herself doing it 2 or 3 times a year, to blow off the cobwebs, haha. At this point I asked, "How's Carl?" Her chatter stops. Silence fills the air until she finally says, "Who's Carl?" I then proceeded to tell her that I knew everything, that I'd changed the locks, and all her stuff was round the side of the house. Instead of being apologetic, she goes on a thunderous diatribe, blaming me for everything. At the end, I told her how her stuff smelled of the cat's poo, and hung up. I blocked her number and didn't see her until Wednesday, When I came back from work, she was sitting on the doorstep. All the bags had been moved. I ignored her, walked around the back, let myself in the back door, and locked it behind me. Haven't spoken to her since, although she's made her attempts, including a letter. In regards to Carl with a K, I don't know what happened between him and his wife. I do know that he said it wasn't personal to a friend of mine. That made me angry. Like, is that supposed to make it better? Someone saying something isn't personal just means it isn't personal to them. It was to me. I heard that COVID hasn't been kind to his business, though, but you won't catch me shedding no tears for that, unless it's tears of laughter.
That's all OP has to say at this time. Well, good job, OP. Notice though how she turned it all on you when you said that you knew everything. I don't know what would have been the right thing to say to her, but something on the offensive line that would hurt or scare her, I suppose. Being cheated on is really bad, and I'm sorry it happened to you. You did nothing wrong, and they both deserve whatever it was that came their way. Wish you all the best, OP. With that, we conclude the story for today. Please like, comment, and share the video if you enjoyed it. Also, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you will be notified when we upload the next video. Take care.